this is Jody Roeber, and she's going to be our first interviewee. So the first question is to just introduce yourself, tell a little bit about your nursing career and your education.
Okay, so Jody, my legal name's Johanna Roeber. I have been a nurse really for around 40 years. My education initially was through Loretta Heights College in Denver, Colorado, and I got my bachelor's degree, and then worked here for a little while at Delta Hospital, and then took some time off and had babies, and then came back to work and worked a few years here, and then and I worked med surge, and you get called into ICU and to ER, and then I worked OB for a while, and then I started. I took a job. My oldest was about to start school, so I took a job with the school district, and I continued to work PRN at the hospital for probably 14 years or so, and because I was worried I was going to lose my skills in school nursing, but I did community slash school nursing for 18 years, and in the community from 1987 to 2005. And then actually, I got a phone call from Judy Davis, and she and I had gotten our master's degrees together. And so when I was in my mid 30s, I started my master's program. And at the time, CU was offering a master's in nursing slash family nurse practitioner program. And so Judy and I both took it. I don't think either one of us really thought we wanted to be nurse practitioners. It was the program available in the area at the time. And when we first started, they told us it would be a 2 year program. And I thought, anybody can do anything for 2 years. And so we both continued to work full time, and it was through the summers. And then at the end of the first year, they said, well, it's probably going to take a half a year, at least more. Okay, we're through with the first year. What the heck? We'll do another half year more. I think at the end of the next semester, it was, well, it's going to take a year more. Okay, we're through with a year and a half,
Oh,
so as it turned out, which I hadn't even realized, but Judy said they had shared with us, we got a general master's in nursing with an FNP training, and that was, and they, so we took 40 credits above and beyond a master's degree, which I think today would probably be like a DNP program.
right.
And so anyway, graduated with that. And then, like I said, she called me when Sherry Barkley was retiring. And I think everybody thought when Sherry retired, the program would probably dissolve.
Hmm.
And she said, we need a new director, and I think you'd be great. And of course, I loved the team. That's the reason I moved into that job, because I knew and had worked with almost all of them. I had worked with Judy from the beginning of my career, and intermittently we happened to get our 4 years of getting our master's degree and FNP together, and and I admired her and knew they did great work out there. And then I'd worked with Jeannie when Jeannie Robb and Tracy first moved here. She worked in the OB department, and we worked together in the old hospital. So I knew Jeannie very well. And I did not know Cindy Brabeck. She was the other full time person. And then at that time, Kathy Wiley still worked clinical. Trying to think of who else. That was the main team, I think, that was there.
Hmm.
And then and so anyway, I got my master's about I think it was 1997 when we finally got our degrees. The interesting thing is, I was expecting my fourth child when I started that program, and I was going to you. This is a small world,
I
isn't it?
remember that.
You were
Yeah.
my nurse practitioner. That's
Yeah.
right. Oh my gosh. And so all of us kind of stayed connected in some way, I think, and was so grateful that when the program finally ended, Anthony was 2 years old, I think. So I was pregnant the first year, and I think he was two or so, something like that, when it ended. And I was really to the point where I thought I couldn't keep going to school. But anyway, the technical college, brought a lot of opportunity to work with great people. and to feel like you're doing something positive for the community. And I work with some nurses that graduated from that program now. As a matter of fact, I work with nurses who are former graduates prior to mine. One's a CRNA. One of our graduates from when I first started is just started as a nurse practitioner. So it's interesting what that program brought to people in this community. I'm not sure what for some of them, if they would have gone into nursing if there hadn't been a small LPN program in the community. Because as I said, even for me, looking at my master's program, anybody can do something for 2 years or 1 year. But I think when you start looking at, I'll be honest, I don't know if I would have gotten my master's degree in the beginning at that stage of my life. They said it's going to take you 4 years. I
Absolutely.
probably would have said, I'll wait. So basically, at the end of 2005, let's see, May of 2005, I left the school district job and moved into the technical college. And Judy was hired basically to kind of mentor me in my first, and Sherry Barkley was kept on for a few months to mentor and help me get started. That was an extremely demanding job, way more than I had ever anticipated. And I mean, the number of phone calls you get for people inquiring about the program, the number of phone calls from people, getting into the program and people getting out of the program and taking their boards, and
Mhm.
people in the program, it was unbelievable. And we did have a secretary at that time, Carol Abeta, and Carol helped a lot, but honestly, most of it fell on the director, and the director is expected to teach and manage the whole program.
Mhm.
And at that time, we sold the books, we collected the money for the books, we we developed handouts, which the instructor hand wrote and gave out to the students. And even teaching one class in your first year, it was unbelievable the amount of time it took to create those handouts, because we tutored our students through the whole LPN program. And I think gave those nurses a foundation that you would never get in another program. That was the success and the key, but I think it was overwhelming work for the instructors. Maybe not if you'd been there for years and teaching the same subject for years, but
Mhm.
even that it kept us, the amount of work we did for that kept us from even changing textbooks, because people say, oh no, if I change a textbooks, I've got to do all my handouts differently. And I remember just for my pharmacology calc class spending voluminous hours doing my handouts. And then for every test, I made sure I did every single question and wrote it out. And so that when a student came and asked me a question, I'd have it in front of me, so I didn't accidentally make a mistake while they're showing me. And I mean, just I can't even imagine for people who taught multiple courses of time they spent. A good portion of my day was counseling students, I think, too, as a director, a good portion of the day.
Mhm.
And I think what amazed me is many days I'd come in at 7 to counsel students. You'd counsel students during your lunch hour, anytime they had breaks, and you'd stay afterwards. So then I think your next question is, what were my biggest challenges? So I was there 2005 through the summer of 2011. Oh, and I guess I should say too, probably one of the biggest challenges with the program was keeping staff and hiring staff, quality staff, because it required, at that time, which was new, it required a master's degree. So finding anybody with a master's or willing to get a master's and at the pay that we were offering, which was less than any other nursing job, was a Herculean effort. And luckily, I had somebody named Bertie, and one of my students, Jessica Tribble, said, I have an aunt that, really would like to teach, and he thinks she's interested. And so I remember calling Bertie, and Bertie Young. I knew her from when I was a kid, Bertie Ball, and and she said absolutely she was interested, and came in and interviewed, and it was sort of a retirement job for her. which this is way more than a retirement job. She was one of the great catches I think we got of somebody in the community that wanted to give back and was willing to come in for the salary and with a master's degree and the expertise. I don't know if she had a master's at the time. I think she went back and got one. And it was so hard to find people, and also the school wouldn't spend any money on advertising for positions. So I remember one summer I lost a nurse, and we advertised for about a month, and then they told me I had to pull the ad because they weren't going to pay for it anymore. And I was like, it was July. I said, well, how am I supposed to find a nurse? And they said, well, I don't know, but we can't afford to pay for that ad anymore. I was like, and uncanny, I got a phone call from a woman. And I remember her husband's name was Charlie Daniels. That's how, I don't remember her name. I think Sherry or I don't know. Anyway, and so I remember that. But and she said, I drove by your school and wondered if you ever have any teaching positions. I was like, God put her in my lap. Now she only stayed one semester, but she came in with lots and moved to this area. Thought she wanted to teach, and and she did a great job and taught for us in Montrose, did clinical for us in Montrose. That same time, got a phone call from a woman, Pat Frazier, who's a pediatric nurse practitioner, and she said, "Hey, drove by your school, and I just wondered." And I remember for both these women, I said, "Did you see the ad in the paper?" "No, is there an ad in the paper?" And I said, "Yes." And Pat came on and did clinical for us and she was a came from the Boulder area, pediatric nurse practitioner. And same thing with Cheryl Smith. Cheryl wanted kind of semi-retire from being a family nurse practitioner, and said, here's my demands. We own sheep. I think it was 3 weeks off in April every year, and I'm willing to work so many hours a week. If you can make that happen, I'll work for you. And I remember we looked at the schedule, we wrote everything down, and called her back and said, I have a job for you. And she looked at me and just laughed. She said, "You have got to be kidding." She said, "I was sure you'd tell me no way." So we picked up some great hires that way. But every time you hired somebody, in the back of your head is, if they leave, what are we going to do? Because you really couldn't ask the existing staff to keep taking on more and more. And so, very fortunate for the people that I hired during the time I was there and the people that were already there. It was definitely a team working together, but lots of demands on those people. And anyway, so that was number one, was staffing, which continues and is really ultimately the demise of the program. I think the biggest challenge, the other biggest challenge when I started, we were offering the program in Grand Junction, and Mesa State had come to Sherry 2 years prior to me starting and said, "Hey, we want you to run an LPN program in Grand Junction." And the other thing that had happened that year was the state of Colorado was making the decision that everybody that taught, no matter what level you taught, had to have a master's degree, and that we also needed every nursing program in the state of Colorado had to be nationally accredited. So I walk in with 1 year still left in Grand Junction, and knowing we were going to close it down, but we still had a full cohort, and we had a full cohort in here in Delta. And so that year was so difficult, because I would go at least once a week, sometimes twice a week, to Grand Junction and check on that program. Most of the teachers were in Delta. We had sort of a very minimal staff that taught a little bit out of Grand Junction. Everything was done over the computer, like you and I are talking now. The other thing was that we were working on national accreditation, and the state said we had to have a common curriculum across the whole state. At that time, Delta had a curriculum. There were several LPN programs. Every program had their own curriculum unique to that school. And they said, and it was all accredited through the State Board of Nursing. And they said, no, 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 you're going to have the same curriculum across the state. And so I started going to monthly meetings through Colorado Community College system. So not only was I going to Grand Junction 1 or 2 days a week, I was going to Denver every month, usually for 2 to 3 days, and at times for a whole week. And very expensive for the school to send me over there all the time. But it was the only way we were going to stay open is if we became nationally accredited. So we started, and I didn't know a lot about the program. We started negotiating for what was going to be the LPN program. And we had more credits than anybody else. We had the most to cut. And so I would go in and negotiate with all these schools in a common classroom, pick up the phone and call Judy and Jeannie and all of them and say, okay, this is what they want to do. No, don't you let them do that, you know. And I said, okay, what are we willing to compromise on? And I go back in the room and we duke it out for no, this needs to be the LPN program curriculum. This needs to stay. This can go. Let's move this into this. And we did that for over a year. And I remember in November I was there for a whole week, and meanwhile you still have students you're teaching and
Right.
a program you're running and you're preparing for the next year and and then we had a woman talk to us, Jody Parks Doyle, I remember was her name, and she at first worked for Colorado Community College system, and she had gotten schools accredited in the past. And so I basically went to, and I talked to her, would she help us get accredited? And yep, but she wanted, a certain amount of money. And I thought, there's no way our college is going, or the technical college is going to pay for that. So I went to the other programs because by this time, all of the associate degree programs that had an LPN, they'd have an LPN where then you could go join it and take the second year as an associate. They all dropped their LPN programs. All of them did. And
Wow.
they would have had to become nationally accredited in the LPN program and nationally accredited in associate degree program. So they all dropped the LPN. So now we went from something like 8 LPN schools in the state down to like 3 or 4, I think 4. And Mesa County was still, we still had theirs, but they were about to start one at Mesa University. And so basically there were 4 left. And so I went to those other 3 colleges and said, would you help share the cost of this consultant? And they all, and by gosh, they went to their, and all of it, because it was going to end up being like $5,000 each instead of, $20,000 or $15,000 or whatever. So they all said, yep, they would contribute. And so we all paid like our $5,000 to have her. And then I immediately, on a weekly basis, set up phone calls and she would give me, okay, this is what you're going to need to do. And I started doing the work and I delegated. Jeannie Robb was getting her master's degree at the time. So she took on some of it as part of her master's degree and she'd get a grade on it, but we'd send it to Jody Parks Doyle and she'd make changes, and then we'd send it back. And anyway, I ended up rewriting a good, probably the majority of it with Jody. And then every time I went to Denver to a community college, network program,
Mhm.
um, I would set up a meeting because she lived in, I think, Colorado Springs. And so she'd meet me at a library. So when the meetings were over, I would meet her with my notebook of everything I was working on and we'd review what needed to happen next. She and I finished the work. She came and did a mock survey. And so the second year, we just had our own program. And like I said, we ordered the books. We picked the books for the program. We ordered the books for the program. We sold the books for the program. We collected the money. We collected anything that you needed for that program. Vaccinations, we gathered that. We did, basically the director did all of it. It was our program and ours, and it lived and died by the people that were hired. And so that was a little surprising to me. And so I'll be honest, it took us, the first year was working on the curriculum. Then the next year I worked on the report that needed to be submitted. The following year, I was there 6 years. So it was at least 2 years, maybe 3 years on changing the curriculum because we change it and then we change it a little bit more until we got to where the state board of nursing, we had the number of credits the state board of nursing would allow us. And I think when I started, the college had 70 credit hours for an LPN program, and they said that's nearly an associate degree program. That's ridiculous. And we cut it down to 30, 40, I think, and then 35. And then
Yeah.
I think we cut it down to 30, which was still more. I think they wanted it only to be 24 credits, something like that. And I think finally, so that took several years for that to happen.
Mhm.
And all these meetings every single month. And then took a whole year to write the report and submit it. And then we brought her out and she did a mock survey. So we were supposed to be accredited when I started, I think by 2008, January of 2008. And nobody was ready by January 2008. And so then they extended it to 2009, and then they extended to, I think, 2010. And so we were mock surveyed in the spring of 2010 and surveyed in I think the fall of 2000 or of 10 and 10. And lo and behold, we got accredited one shot deal. So of the four programs, Boulder and Delta applied, and both of us by by that fall of 2010 got nationally accredited. And so we were the only two nationally accredited programs in the state of Colorado. um, and the first two for a standalone LPN program in the state of Colorado. All the others that had been accredited in the past, which was really just Otero, and I think there was one other one, they were part of an associate degree program, and they'd been nationally accredited that way. So we really were the first standalone nationally accredited LPN program in the state.
Right.
So becoming nationally accredited, closing the Grand Junction program, and staffing were my greatest challenges. During the time, what were my greatest successes? Well, becoming nationally accredited. And because I think there is something said when you've worked that hard and you have success, especially after the first try. We had 100% pass rate, I think, the whole time I was there, which I don't know that I can take too much credit for that because that's the staff, that was there. And I think the other thing was, um, we I built the scholarship program up every year. We had more scholarships for that program every year I was there. And so I felt like that was our reputation in the community. And and of course, the students would have no idea that that even happened, that I was out recruiting people to give scholarships to the students. I felt that was a huge success, that we'd gone from, really, it was the Horizon Scholarship and a couple other things, to pretty soon there were thousands of dollars being given to those
It's
students to make it
amazing.
a success.
That's amazing.
And I think the other thing was, we had no simulation program when I started, and I bought I found, I'll be honest, I walked around the campus the first year and everybody's talking about everything they bought with Perkins dollars, and the nursing program we got some kind of a flip chart or something. So the next year when Perkins came through, I asked for a simulation mannequin. All those headboards that simulated oxygen, I asked for those. And they were like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I asked for thousands of dollars worth of stuff and could justify why we did it. And by gosh, I started so I took what was a room that had a few beds in it and turned it into true simulation of nursing. That was my now. Jeannie or Bertie came along and built it even more. But
Right.
even before I left, we took that, what used to be my office space, and turned that into a simulation room with the ability to videotape, the students. So anyway, those were the things I feel really proud of. The pass rate, the reputation the school had. I think that we built it to a state of the art as much as we could in our little space lab, and of course becoming nationally credited in one full swoop. And so only being there for 6 years, I felt like I got a lot done.
Oh,
And
yeah.
we need ways to get nurses out quickly right now,
Do.
very quickly. And
Yeah.
these technical colleges are a great place to make that happen. Well, I thought our graduations were always very special. I thought they were hugely attended by the community and the students, you know. I thought they were a beautiful event as well, you know, well orchestrated. And I'm sure, I don't know if Sherry put those together or not, but I always thought it was a, a really nice tribute to the graduates and usually to the instructors as well, that I think those were good things. I think I've told you, you know, I think having been able to have simulation in our little bitty program, and 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 of course the accreditation was a real bee in my bonnet, you know, that we were able to achieve that uh, so successfully. And then so those were the big highlights, honestly. And now seeing some of those students be oh so successful is quite an honor, quite as well.